Welcome back to the blog. Today we're going to talk about Othello, the Moor of Venice. This is one of Shakespeare's later plays. It's one of his most popular. That's pretty well known. Most of people have heard about it if they've heard of Shakespeare. And it's a painful, for me it's one of the more painful plays to watch because Othello murders his own wife. Now, he does it in a more humane way than many of the other... I don't know, King Lear's got painful stuff to watch. And I suppose you can put it behind a curtain, but, you know, he smothers her, so it's not as violent. I mean, but she's so trusting and so loving and so good and so loyal. Anyway, so it's the story of a Moor, meaning that he's probably Mohammedan, but he is living in Venice. It's an Italian play, and he's probably been converted to Christianity because if he wasn't a Christian at this time and place, that would have been a really big deal, especially for his wife's father, Brabantio. He would have made a really big deal about that, but he doesn't. The biggest issue that Brabantio has with Othello is that he's black, because he's Northern African probably. So it's a play about Othello. He is in Venice. He is a very accomplished war hero. He's been out in a bunch of battles and he's climbed his way up the ladder that way. He's shown a lot of valor and courage, and he's a really good leader. At one point, they think he might be lost on the sea, and his men are really upset about that, and when they catch sight of his ship, they all rejoice and are so happy that he's going to be there. So he's got some really good leadership qualities, and he's really proven himself. And so the play starts out with two men talking, Rodrigo and Iago, and they're talking about Othello, and Iago tells you from the very beginning of the play that he absolutely hates Othello. And that he hates him because Othello had a position higher up, like Othello was over all these men and there was a position underneath him where he could promote someone, and Othello promoted Cassio instead of Iago. And so Iago's really upset about that. And some scholars have said that it doesn't seem like he has enough kind of motivation, like that wouldn't be a big enough deal to do the kinds of things that Iago does. But then others, and the others are the ones that I agree with, he's kind of a sadist, and he's really very power hungry. And he kind of has this idea of revenge, and it just balloons, right? Like it just gets bigger and bigger, like, oh, I'm not just going to take Othello down, I'm going to take all these other people down, and I'm going to control and manipulate everybody. And for a period of time, Iago is kind of the confidant for most of the major characters, and they all are discussing their major problems with him, and he's giving them advice and telling them what to do, while at the same time it's kind of like a chess game for him. He's just manipulating everybody and telling everybody what to do. He's a really evil character with virtually no redeeming qualities, who gets it in the end. In fact, the play ends with them discussing how they're going to torture Iago to force him to confess and talk and explain what he's done and why he's done it. And that's like a major, one of the most, I mean, people die, but to be tortured, that's like a worse consequence than to die. So he's one of his worst characters who gets one of the worst consequences at the end of the play. Now, there's a lot of things to know about how to read Shakespeare better. That's why we have a How to Read Shakespeare video training, which should be coming out in the next few weeks, which will really help you with all of the Shakespeare plays. And also, the Q&A Tuesday on why Shakespeare is a big deal would probably be a good one to watch in conjunction with this and other Shakespeare reviews that we do, because it's important to understand that Shakespeare is one of the biggest deals in the West and why he's a big deal. And, you know, there's so many great men and women, scholars and professors and stuff, and they just, you know, even Hutchins just said it. He said it great in the Great Conversations. He says, you're going to miss out on a huge chunk of your own culture if you don't get Shakespeare. So that's my little Shakespeare plug that I pretty much do every review, but I want you to know that it's a great experience. And those natural consequences are one of several very important criteria for why Shakespeare is so valuable to read and how he reinforces the ideas of right and wrong and what's right and wrong. So so we're going along. We know Iago hates Othello and he's bent for revenge. We also know that Roderigo's in love with Desdemona. And we also find out that Desdemona and Othello have just eloped and gotten married, and Desdemona's father doesn't know about it. So Iago and Roderigo set about to let him know in a really annoying and rude way, as they are all through the play, and it upsets him. And he goes to where this kind of the Senate is meeting, and well, first he confronts Othello, and then they go and they talk to the Senate, and Othello just says, look, we knew you'd be upset about it. We just went and got married, and frankly, I guess he doesn't say we knew you'd be upset about it. That's just kind of understood. But he's like, she volunteered to come. I mean, she wanted to marry me. If you want me to bring her in here to let you know, I will. And he does. So he brings in Desdemona, and she's like, I'm totally in love with him. I totally want to be married to him. And Brabantio just can't get past the fact that he is black. Now, interracial marriage was not okay. Intercultural, interreligious marriage was also not okay at this time and place. And it's interesting because racism is a central theme. There's other plays where, like in Merchant of Venice, that religion is the big deal, religion is the big divisive issue. In this one, Shakespeare has removed the issue of religion in order to just have it be a racial issue. But what's interesting about it is that most of the people don't mind that he's black. Most of the people don't have a hard time with his race. They just, the Senate keeps promoting him. They've brought him in this evening to tell him that they want him to go to Cyprus and head up a battle against the Turks there. And when Brabantio just rages and rages, and he's charmed her with his black magic and all this kind of stuff, the Senate's like, you know what? He's a great guy, and she wanted to marry him, so it's fine. Which is really pretty cool. But Othello has his great weaknesses. He has his great strengths, and he has his great weaknesses. And he does fall prey to Iago's, the little seeds that he plants of jealousy. This is the play that we get the term or the phrase, the green monster of jealousy. It's said a few different times in here. And one of the things that's one of the themes that's predominant here, as in so many Shakespeare plays, is the idea of seeing versus being blind. Some of the time it's brought out like really to the forefront with physical sight and blindness, like in King Lear. In this one, it's an issue of everybody. I seriously am tempted to go through and count how many times the word honest is in this play. It's gotta be 30 times or more. It's said over and over and over and over and over again, and it's always in reference to Iago. Everybody calls him Honest Iago. Everybody is convinced that everything that comes out of his mouth is the absolute truth. And he is master manipulator. He has learned all the thing I kept thinking about was the ancient sophists in Plato's time, when the rhetoricians came in and were teaching rhetoric, and I kept thinking about Covey's character versus personality ethic issue. The concept of, are you good at skills? Like, are you a good salesman? Are you good at presenting yourself? Are you good with people? Are you a good diplomat? Because you're good inside and because your intentions are good, or have you just mastered the skills and you're really rotten inside? And most of us are probably a combination of good motivations and bad motivations. Iago is an example of purely evil, self-centered motivations. He wants to control everybody, and he wants to destroy Othello, and he doesn't care who else he has to destroy along with Othello in order to get the job done. And so it's this idea of being able to see, because nobody can see that Iago isn't telling the truth. And it takes all the way to the end of the play for his deeds to catch up with him. Now, it's so fantastic because Shakespeare always gives us that satisfaction in the end, whether everybody's died or not, and it's really painful, as in this play and others. It's painful, but that sense of justice, oh good, you were going to stick it to the bad guy. It's clear who the bad guy is, and it's clear that he's going to pay for what he's done. And that's so critical to building character, and it's so critical to becoming a person who's going to have a positive influence on the world instead of someone who's going to run around and hurt people because they just can't bother caring about how anybody else feels and what anybody else thinks. And they don't usually set out to destroy someone's life and that kind of thing, but some people are just so self-centered. Anyway, that's why these kinds of readings are so valuable. That's why Shakespeare can build character if read appropriately. If you understand his theatrical tools and means, if you understand the characteristics of what he's doing and why he's important, boy, you can have a fantastic experience. So they're going along, they take off to Cyprus, and Iago just sets out to plant a seed. Brabantio does it first. On their way out of the Senate, Desdemona's dad says to Othello, "Watch out, because she deceived me, so she might deceive you." And that strikes Othello like, oh. And it is true. I mean, there's some truth in it. But Desdemona proves herself over and over again. Now, she's kind of an idiot because she keeps pleading for Cassio. Cassio gets himself into trouble, and Othello demotes him, and so Cassio wants to get his position back in the military, and he, of course, according at Iago's urging, he goes to Desdemona to seek an audience with Othello to get back into his good graces, and he wants Desdemona to help him with that. And so she keeps going on and on talking about Cassio, and it's kind of playing into Iago's plan because he's trying to make Othello believe that Desdemona is having an affair with Cassio, which it's so ridiculous how quickly Othello believes it on such flimsy evidence. Now, this is something that you have to know about Shakespeare. Everything he does is larger than life. Like, you and I don't usually have experiences where multiple people are getting murdered, although it does happen. Jealous rage and jealous murder happen all the time. Still today, it happens. But most of us don't live life that way, but we do believe things that we shouldn't believe without doing our due diligence and without getting all the facts and all the information, and we just buy into whatever anybody else tells us, and we are upset with people. And, you know, it's so important as you read Othello to think about, I think this is one of the most key things in this play, is to think about, why does Othello buy it? Why does he become Iago's puppet? Why? Iago might be clever and be able to manipulate people, and he's really subtle in his in the way that he does things, but there's some character flaw in Othello that's willing to go along with it. There's something in him that feels his own insecurities, his own, you know, I kept thinking, did he just, for him, was it just an issue of, it was just always too good to be true that this upper middle class, absolutely gorgeous to die for girl would fall for him? Does he have some kind of inferiority complex? Does he have something going on with him that he somehow kind of wants to believe it? He assumes it must be true. He assumes he must not be man enough to hold her. And so it's really interesting. And then to think about your own life and to think about times when you've believed stuff that wasn't true and you've gone along with something that was a bad idea. When people have participated in some bad behavior and you haven't stopped it, what was going on in you that you didn't stop it? What was your role that you played? Because it's so easy in this play, because Iago is so just a black villain, that it's so easy to just blame. But it's so important to look at why it only happens because people let themselves be manipulated. And so why is that? Why does Rodrigo go along with it? Why does he give all his money to Iago and participate in killing Cassio? What is the weakness in the people around Iago that he's able to just control everyone the way that he does? And this is one last thing I want to mention. there's so many good things to think about. Some more of the themes would be honesty versus deceit, passion versus reason. That comes up several times. Is your passion controlling you, or are you able to calm down and sit down with yourself and really think it through and decide what might be true and what might be false? It's so important. And Othello doesn't do it. And how often do we not do it? How often are we just, fly into a rage and, you see something going on at work, you see, your manager comes down and says something, you watch one of your kids do something to one of the other kids, and you just assume you know the whole picture, and you just fly into a rage, and passion is just in control of your behavior and your decisions, and you've got to calm down and think that through. Reputation, patience versus rashness are big themes in this play. What is love? Comes up so often with Shakespeare and in all the great works. One of the most important great ideas. What is love? When are we really being loving? At one point, Othello kind of basically says that he's going to kill Desdemona because he loves her. Because there's this really famous line that I'd heard lots of other places where he says, when he's pleading his case at the very end, and he says, one who... Where is it at? He says, one who loved too much but loved well. I can't find it. I'll put it up on the blog post. I thought I had it right here. I thought it was in his last soliloquy, but it's not. It's a little earlier on. He says he's loving her to kill her so that she won't tempt other men. I mean, when are we deceiving ourselves about this thing we're calling love, and we're not really loving somebody? We're just like, whatever. But one of the things, the last thing I want to mention is that in some of the versions that I've watched, they take out something like, I love Kenneth Branagh, and I'm a big fan of his, and I was watching his Othello version. He plays Iago, and of course he does a fantastic job. They take out a lot of dialogue, they switch things up a little bit, but it's true to the story, and it's in Shakespearean language. But when Desdemona is dying, she's not all the way dead, and Othello makes the mistake of letting Emilia in. And when Emilia comes in and sees Desdemona there dying, Desdemona tells Emilia that she has committed suicide, and in her last breath tries to protect Othello. She is virtuous to the bitter end. She is true to her principles all the way through, and she doesn't even want to implicate him in her own death because she knows she's going to die, and what's going to happen to him if he's murdered her innocently, and she knows she's innocent, and she knows it's probably going to be found out, and she's just that good. And Shakespeare has a handful of characters in his plays that are just that good, that are the model, that are the example of, can you be that good? Something to aspire to. But in the Kenneth Branagh, and I don't know about others, Branagh, however you say it, they've taken those lines out, and you don't get that last great moment of virtue from Desdemona to know that she is innocent and pure to the very end. And it elevates her character 10 times more, and it makes the murder even worse. And it magnifies Othello's grief in his final soliloquy and as he commits suicide because of what he's done. Get your Asimov and read it alongside it. And notice that in the last soliloquy, as Othello talks about his own death and why he's committing suicide, he compares himself to Judas in betraying the innocent. And that final line from Desdemona is one of the reasons that he's saying that, because she was so pure and so guiltless, and he betrayed her as Judas betrayed Jesus. So, it's fantastic. I know this went very long, and I'm sorry, but I hope it was helpful, and I hope I've been able to highlight some things for you that will make your experience in Othello that much better. And I'll link one of the better videos on YouTube, one of the versions that you can watch. Again, follow that, get how to read Shakespeare, and follow that process of how to read it in a way that will make it fantastic for you. And we will see you next time.